service if I like, I order twice. Hibachi, got the gravy on the rice. Rolling in Mexico like a
Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome into another edition of the Steelers Sunday Night Q&A. My name is Jeremy Betts, and I'm joined by my crazy cat, and nobody else actually tonight. It's just me and Fatso Catso over here, breaking down some Pittsburgh Steelers stuff. Oh my goodness. I feel like I haven't been with you guys for a while, and that's because last week I was out of town. So thanks to Dave Schofield for holding it down for me last week. It was fun to listen, and fun to be back now as well as the host and the guy talking to you about, man, kind of a bummer of a weekend for Pittsburgh Steelers fans. We're getting more news as this show is airing here. That Jaylen Warren has a fairly significant hamstring injury that's going to sideline him for at least 2 to 4 weeks. That could put him in jeopardy. I would say it's doubtful at this point that he starts for the Steelers, or maybe not starts, but plays in week 1 of the regular season here. That is a tough break for Warren, tough break for the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are going to be relying on him along with Najee Harris and this running game to hopefully get things going for what has been a really, really slow start for this offense. I mean, good grief. Can you believe how slow it's been? I think we're all kind of sitting here a little shell-shocked and trying to convince ourselves that, maybe it's not as bad as it looks. Guys can get healthy still. It's just preseason. Let's not overreact. We overreacted in a positive way last year to what was just a stellar preseason, maybe the best preseason ever by a starting offense in NFL history, with Kenny Pickett and company just steamrolling teams in their appearances on preseason nights of football action, and then proceeding to absolutely stink up the joint when it came to the regular season. So maybe that's the opposite of what happens this year. I think it's more along the lines of, this is a unit that's going to take time to get going, no matter what happens, no matter who's back there at quarterback, no matter who's out there playing on the offensive line. We'll get to the offensive line in a little bit. We'll get to your questions as well. If you are listening live, obviously, thank you so much for tuning in to this show. Throw all your questions in here, man. We'll get to everything tonight. I don't care what it is. If you want to talk Brandon Ayuk, we can talk Brandon Ayuk. If you want to talk other receivers, that could be an option for this team. We'll do that. If you want to talk about Mike Tomlin, the offensive line coach, if you want to talk about Arthur Smith, and man, some fans already calling for his head on social media. That's premature as premature gets. But hey, let's just talk tonight. Let's talk about the good. There was some good, right? We've got some players to talk about on the defensive side of the ball, maybe even some guys on offense. Let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly through 2 weeks of the Steelers preseason. It has been a roller coaster ride. And I didn't get to watch the Friday debacle live. Saturday debacle of week 2 preseason live. I was with some family this weekend, but I did get to catch up on it and see some of the plays, the highlights, lowlights, whatever you want to call it, from preseason week 2. And I was less than impressed, to be honest. I'm sure most of you were. There are some things that are caveats to what we saw that are legitimate reasons, not excuses. There are also some things that we need some questions answered ASAP. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to talk about some of these things. And first off, I want to give you my good, bad, and ugly. So we'll get to your questions as they come in. Gene Smith's got a question in. Thank you, Gene. We'll get to it in a second. Keep popping those in there, and we'll get to those. But while we're getting started here, I want to give you my good, bad, and ugly that I've seen through 2 weeks of the Steelers preseason. Good has to be this linebacker core and the starting defensive line. That front seven, the starting front seven for this team, is as good as it gets in football. If you are a Steelers fan looking for a bright side right now, the starting unit for the front seven, TJ Watt, I'll list them off here. TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, Keanu Benton, Larry Ogunjobi, Alex Highsmith, and then let's just say Patrick Queen and Landon Roberts. That's 7 guys right there. Those 7 guys are as good as it gets in the game of professional football for a front 7. They just are. And then you start to add in a couple depth pieces there. Nick Herbig, you can throw him in there as an 8th guy. Peyton Wilson, he has some ups and downs throughout the game, but you see why he is so highly regarded as an athlete, as a linebacker for the NFL, and why the Steelers chose him in the 3rd round despite the injury concerns. You see that on tape, no problem whatsoever. So add in those guys. Let's even talk about guys like Montravius Adams, who looks really, really good for a depth piece. DeMarvin Leal has been impressive as a depth piece along the front 7 there. And then I think, you get to a place where what more do we need to see from these guys in preseason? I don't think there's really anything. So that's a good thing. You see what the Steelers want to do from that side of the football. And it's going to be havoc inducing across the board. Guys do need to stay healthy, obviously, but I just think that when you talk about good things that have come out of this preseason, you've got to look at that front 7 and you've got to say, okay, the starting front 7 and a few of their initial depth pieces, you got to feel as good about that as any team in the league does about their front 7. So that's great. The bad, okay? The bad so far has been, I'll just be honest, it's been the quarterback play. And I'm not saying it's all their fault, but it's just been bad. And I also am not saying that there haven't been some good plays. But man, it's just not been what we hoped for. We were hoping somebody would kind of reach out, grab this and say, this is mine. Whether that's Russ or Justin Fields. One of those guys, please just take it by the horns and say, this is my starting gig and I'm the guy. But nobody's done that. And nobody's really even come close. And we've seen Russell Wilson for 5 series against the Bills 2s and 3. Well, Bills 1s and 2s on defense. And it was ugly. And well, it was bad. Okay. I'll just say it was bad because we'll get to ugly here in a minute. And again, not all his fault, but the check down game is obviously there for Russ, and he's going to rely on that a lot. And it's going to annoy fans at times because he's going to check the ball down on 3rd and long and see if somebody can make a play. That's his MO. He doesn't want to make the mistake. And then you flip the script over to Justin Fields, who you still see some head scratching field read decision making, but the athletic ability is just there. We'll get to these guys in a minute because I want to break down why I think the Steelers should just roll with Fields. And I'll just throw that out there. I think they should. And we'll talk about that in a second. But I'm not going to jump way too hard on that yet, but I'll give my explanation for why in just a minute. But I guess my biggest takeaway from the quarterbacks is that they're not able to really show what they can do at their best because of the ugly that we're going to get to in a second. And that's the offensive line. But when you talk about the quarterbacks, it's just been too inconsistent, not enough playmaking down the field, not enough chances to open guys. There are open guys in this offense. We'll talk about that as well. But again, it's preseason football, so I'm not trying to overreact here. But it just hasn't been great from the quarterbacks. It's been pretty bad. Let's talk about the ugly, though, and it's been this offensive line, whether it's injuries, Troy Fautanu, Nate Herbig out for potentially the season with a torn rotator cuff. We're finding out here from Steelers beat writers and the main insiders from like NFL Network, ESPN. It's not a good situation for Nate Herbig. He's probably going to miss the whole year, or at least a huge chunk of it. And Zach Frazier was probably going to win that starting job anyway, but you all of a sudden find yourself without really a quality second piece at center, unless you want to move James Daniels over there. And that gets the shuffling of the offensive line has got to stop. I mean, Let's talk about Broderick Jones. Just awful stuff that we've seen from Broderick Jones so far. It looks like he's taking a step back. I don't think he's healthy. I don't think the offensive or the staff, by moving him around all over the place, is doing him any favors. And I have some really strong stances on that. I think Dan Moore Jr.'s got to go, and you just got to put Broderick Jones over there. Or you've got to just say, okay, DMJ, your depth. I'm sorry, your depth. You're not starting anymore. Broderick Jones, you play left tackle. Play all the left tackle. Even though Troy Fautanu is out with injury, play all the left tackle, and we're going to try other guys at right. We're going to try Spencer Anderson at right, Dylan Cook at right. Whatever we can do for these other guys at right tackle. Anything. It can't be worse than what we're seeing, and we got to get you used to playing left tackle for this football team. It's just been ugly. So I don't know where else to go with it other than guys are letting defenders run absolutely scot-free at quarterbacks, providing minimal resistance when they're in position, bad footwork, bad hand usage. And I think that a lot of that falls back on coaching. I really do. I was definitely of the opinion before the season that the Steelers should have moved on from Pat Meyer. In this offseason when they moved on from Matt Canada. It just made sense to do that, to just start fresh, let Arthur Smith bring in his type of guy for offensive line coaching. And I don't know, man. I just don't think he's a great offensive line coach. We've had lots of conversations, myself and Andrew Wilbar on the Steelers Fix, about how we were never really a fan of Pat Meyer, even when they brought him over from Carolina. It's like he oversaw some of the worst offensive lines in football for a couple years in Carolina, and then you bring him to Pittsburgh and he's going to fix what you got there. I don't know about that. It just didn't work. And it's still not working. And you thought maybe the strength of the offense could be the run blocking through the offensive line. That hasn't been there either, because these guys don't know what they're doing and there's too much shuffling around. Now, a lot of that will settle down when the regular season starts, but right now it's a big problem. Pull this up here from Mr. Woodside. Agreed, Jeremy, the left side was atrocious. Yes, but 77 was the main problem all half. Absolutely. He's not healthy. That arm is not healthy. He shouldn't be playing. He should be playing in games right now. It's such a tough situation, though. I get it, because you're down Fautanu, you're down a couple guys. Dan Moore Jr. is completely inept at right tackle. That's an anchor dragging the whole unit down, in my opinion. And I'm done with the Dan Moore Jr. defense. Okay, left tackle, but he can't do anything else for you. So what are you doing? Keeping him on the team. Put the guys that you drafted to do the thing where they need to be, and let the guy go. He was a 4th round pick that you had to play at left tackle. You don't have to do that anymore. So move on. Move on, people. Let's do it. We haven't had any problem moving on with other guys. Let's move on from Dan Moore Jr. I'm sorry. That's my rant for the night. Okay. We're going to get to your questions here in a second. Kathy, I'll pull this up, because here to share the misery, looking for hope. We'll get to some hope. We'll get to some hope in the second half of the show. I promise you all. But let's take our break here real quick. And when we come back, we'll answer your questions. We'll talk a little bit more about the good, the bad, and the ugly. We'll share some hope for the future. And we'll just have a good time together. So don't go anywhere. You know the drill. If you're listening live, I'm not going anywhere. I'm just going to pause for a second, stare awkwardly at the camera, and then start talking again. But if you are listening by audio later, enjoy this quick break. We'll be right back on the other side. And welcome back to the Steelers Sunday Night Q&A. Jeremy Betts with you, flying a little solo tonight. It's okay. I wasn't sure when I was going to get to record anyway. I got lucky, started around 8:30. So I didn't want to mess with trying to get anybody else when I didn't know what my own schedule would be. So, but thank you for tuning in. There's 74 of you in the chat right now. Let's keep adding to that. Like, subscribe to the Steel Curtain Network YouTube channel, Fans First Sports Network YouTube channel. And then if you're listening to this, wherever you get your podcasts, like, subscribe, tune in to all of that. I'm excited to continue to be a part of this organization as we're growing and getting back into the swing of things for football, and Steelers regular season right around the corner. So stay tuned for that. All right. We were talking about the offensive line in the second half, or in the first half of the show. And I was talking about Dan Moore Jr., how I'm just done with DMJ. He's an albatross around the neck of the Steelers offensive line, and it's time to move on. Just move on because he's bringing down the rest of the group, because he's mid at best at left tackle, probably poor at left tackle. He's a replacement level starter at left tackle, and he can't do anything else for you anywhere else on the offensive line. That is a guy you cut. That's a guy you get rid of, or you trade. Trade him for a 6, Mr. Woodside says. I like it. If somebody will give you a 6 for that man, you take it. Take it right now and get out of town, get out of Dodge. I like it. Yeah, let's talk about some of your questions here. Let's see here. Mikel Dew, excuse me. Why isn't anyone holding Pat Meyer responsible for the horrible O-line play? Ding, 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 ding. That's what I'm here for tonight. Pat Meyer and this coaching staff, I think, are the problem. You look at some of the guys the Steelers have had play offensive line for them in the past couple years. The big one, obviously, Kevin Dotson. All-pro player for the Rams. Steelers couldn't figure out what to do with him. They were playing him on the, if I remember right, they were playing him on the left side. He's not a left guard. He's a right guard. So he goes to the Rams, and they've got a good offensive line coach. They've got a really good offensive system there. And this guy turns into a stud. He gets a massive paycheck, and the Rams are laughing because they fleeced the Pittsburgh Steelers for an all-pro guard because the Steelers didn't know how to coach him up. That's on Pat Meyer. And you spent all this high-end draft capital on now Broderick Jones, Troy Fautanu, Zach Frazier. These guys just don't look ready in the middle of the field. They just don't look ready. It's been a whole offseason. It's been 2 preseason games now. And yes, I'm venting a little bit. And I know it's preseason, but let's just overreact for a second here if we can, all right? These guys aren't ready to play. Greg Rousseau had Broderick Jones for dinner last night. And snack. It was so good he had it for seconds later because it was just so easy to move through this guy. Dan Moore Jr. on the other side, scrapping it out. He's playing hard. I'll give him that. But pockets collapsing. Even Isaac Seumalo was getting pushed back last night. So let's take it with a grain of salt overall. But man alive, you got to be able to do better than that in preseason week 2 after a really JV, to put it in Mike Tomlin's words, performance in week 1. You knew the corrections to be made, couldn't make them. That's on Pat Meyer. You spent the draft capital. You brought in the horses you needed to pull the chariot from the offensive line position. You don't have the chariot driver. You don't have the coach to make it happen. I'm sorry. That's just how I feel about it. McElDew, you're going to get me on your side holding this guy responsible for horrible offensive line play. After this year, he's got to go if it doesn't get any better very, 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 very quickly. Thank you very much. Good night, everybody. Oh, my goodness. Let's see. Oh, I love this optimism. Gene Smith, here's your question, man. Do you think they're hiding what they really have? Man, I sure hope so. Dang it, I sure hope so. Because, good grief, it was rough to watch. And, yes, they are not putting their best stuff out there, okay? Schematically, this is as vanilla as it gets. You're seeing some of the concepts and things that Arthur Smith likes to run. They're not going to give away everything. They're not going to play. They're not going to build on a lot of things, right? Where in a game you start out your opening drive, you're setting up a bunch of stuff, right? They're not really doing that. They're just getting out there, calling plays, seeing if guys can come out and execute. So there's not a lot of fluidity, not a lot of continuity to it. And so that is a problem. But it's a preseason problem. It's a problem for everybody, and they're fine with that being the problem. They just want to see execution of the play call from the guys that are on the field. And that has been where it's been a struggle. So big picture, right? The big picture is this Arthur Smith system, brand new to the Steelers, new quarterback, a bunch of new pieces in it. Going to take some time to gel it all together. It's preseason. The big picture is not coming together yet. We're not seeing how it all meshes. What we are seeing right now is that bits and pieces of it are working kind of, but nobody's really operating it to the level that they need to right now. So you're not going to get a whole bunch of technical knowledge from me on this. I know it enough to like see it and understand what's happening. But I'm not a coach, right? I guess I'm not a game film analyst like a guy like Derek Bell, who does a fantastic job from Steelers Now, or Coach Kevin Smith from here at the Steel Curtain Network. I'm not going to be able to break it down for you like that, but I understand enough conceptually and schematically of how football works to know that what I'm watching on preseason game film is not the schematic meshing that you're going to get in the regular season. So that's just the best way I can describe it. But so yes, they are hiding some of what they really have, but dudes still got to execute on the field. And I think that's where, if I'm a coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers right now, that's where I'm frustrated. Is like, okay, fundamentally, we're not executing. Money downs, as Mike Tomlin loves to rail on, those are obviously a big deal. But nobody's executing even their small individual assignments. We saw that from the offensive line, and it trickles down to the rest of the unit. Got to fix that offensive line. Absolutely got to fix it. Here's a fun question and really a good discussion. Bad News 44 asks, do we regret trading Deontay Johnson? No one was open. I'm going to push back a little bit on the no one was open deal. I think that there were guys open. I don't think the quarterbacks had time to get guys the football. I think that was where the play breakdown started, was up front. The offensive line was not blocking their man. Russ had guys in his face on everything, even a screen pass. Justin Fields was running for his life out there. We'll talk about Justin Fields in a minute. I want to get to Justin Fields, but yeah, there were some guys open. Bad News 44. It's not as clean as you're hoping. I do think wide receiver is a little bit of an issue, more so than I was giving credit to it before. Credence to that thought process. You got to go get somebody. And I agree. Jeff Hartman tweeted out a little bit earlier today that the Steelers can't go into the regular season with the group as assembled. And I agree with that. There's got to be some additions here, some upside plays, maybe an established veteran wide receiver 2 type. If they can't land the big fish that they want to land at a discount in Brandon Ayuk. So we'll see. It could be better. I will agree with you there. Bad News 44. It could be better. I don't regret trading DJ right now. And I want to talk about why with this next question. I want to get to from Danny Owens Jr. What do you think about the cornerbacks? I actually thought the cornerbacks played pretty well, and they have played pretty well over the course of the preseason here and training camp, obviously. I love Joey Porter Jr. I think he's great. I think he's just fine. I think Dante Jackson has been a fantastic addition to this team. Limited action we've seen from him, yes, but still, it's been good when we've seen him on the field. And I'm excited for what he can do. Corey Trice has been really good. I think very solid the last few games. He's been playing some dime backer for the starting defense, but he's also been coming in as the top outside corner when the second team, third team defense comes in. So I like what I see out of him. I think technically sound. I think actually the athleticism has popped a little bit more. I think he's a willing tackler. He's probably a better tackler, honestly, than Joey Porter Jr. is. I know that's an area of struggle for 24, but Corey Trice looks good when he's coming up to make tackles. He uses his length well. He's in position a lot. And then Darius Rush actually had a pretty good game. I thought he got beat inside on what could have been a touchdown on a slant, but his recovery with that length is good to affect the pass, right? To make sure that that's way out in front of the receiver, and to get hand swatting, wrap up, make it difficult for the receiver to concentrate on making that catch. So he's got to be a little bit better with recognition on that slant route, getting in position a little bit quicker, but his makeup ability because of that length was really good. So I like what I'm seeing there. I thought Thomas Graham was pretty good at nickel corner, having to start there with Beanie Bishop not playing, surprisingly, last night, and Graylin Arnold cut because of injury. And they've got to do something there. I think that that's a little bit of an issue. But overall, I'm pretty encouraged by the cornerback situation so far. So we talked about this a little bit already, Danny Owens. The O-line was not impressive. What are your thoughts to improve? I guess talking about improvements, I think quit the shuffling, move Broderick to the left side, get what you can for Dan Moore Jr., and get Troy Fautana back healthy, obviously, to play on the right side. Commit to Zach Frazier. You kind of have to now, but really commit to him. And get them out there in preseason week 3. Make the starting offensive line play till they gel. Let them gel. Make sure they can. And but quit the shuffling. That's the biggest thing. Quit the shuffling. And this whole thing Pat Meyer teaches where he wants his guys to initiate first contact, even in pass pro. I think that throws a guy like Broderick Jones off balance because he's trying to make that contact before the defender does while he's backpedaling. So it throws off his footwork. Let him kind of set and let the guy come to him and take control from there. Let him be a little bit passive in that pass protection as he's dropping back into the slot. I think that will be beneficial, but that's not how Pat Meyer teaches. I like it for the run game overall, I think, but I think you got to teach different when you're going in pass pro. So we'll see if that changes a little bit with this group. Mike Tomlin's got to get on this offensive line, the coaching staff specifically, and say, listen up. This is unacceptable. You're going to destroy the season if you guys can't figure this out. Figure it out, or heads is going to roll. And it's got to be swift, stern, and forceful. It's got to be. That's my key to fixing it. Quit the shuffling. Get guys in their spots and quit moving them around. Specifically, Broderick Jones, 77. Put him on the left. Don't move him anymore, please. Oy. All right. Let's see here. Okay, give me 1 second. I'm working through some of these questions that have come through since I've been reading through these. So let's see. Going back to the offensive line here. Also, when will Fautana be back from Gavin Anthony? I would expect by the end of this week. I think he'll be pushing to play in preseason week 3. I don't know if they're going to let him, but I think he should be pushing to play in week 3. That's my hope. If not, you rest him, and then he'll be back week after this to prep for the regular season. So I think Fautano would be back in that time frame specifically. Gavin Anthony also asks about Daniels. I think he gets pushed around a little bit because he's not a guy with a violent nature at the position. He's more of a finesse technique guy. But honestly, that actually worked better than anything else I saw from the more physical branded guys on the outside specifically. I think he's going to be fine. I think Daniels can also slide over to center. That may be what you're talking about here. And maybe a guy like Mason McCormick can step in at guard. Maybe a guy like Spencer Anderson can do that. Maybe a guy like Spencer Anderson can play center. Who knows? They've also got it's not now I can't now I'm not gonna be able to think of their backup center. Oh my goodness. I've been talking about him all off season, but anyway, the backup center, the third string center that they've had on the roster for a while here, maybe he's in play for a roster spot now because they just need somebody to play center. Who knows? We'll see. But overall, I thought Daniels was the least of their concerns in the middle of the field or in the offensive line. I will say this. Darnell Washington got pushed around one time in that game, and it didn't happen again. Darnell Washington is the best blocker on this team of anybody. Better than any of the offensive linemen. He's the best blocker on this team. I tweeted it out earlier, a video of he just murdered somebody. Whoever the defender was in the middle of the field, I think it was number 94 maybe, just destroyed him. Put his butt on the bench, put him on his butt on the grass 3 times in one play, and then put his butt on the bench. His coach said, "Okay, that's it. Seen enough. Gotta bring somebody out there who can square up with this guy." Darnell Washington is a dude. He is a unit. He is the best blocker on this team. They've got to get this guy involved in the regular season. They really do. Okay, so this is a fun comment here. But from what we've seen, Fields is the better QB. If we put Wilson out there, we're going to be dealing with the same problems we had with Kenny under Matt Canada with no throws over the middle. You may have a point here, Takaharu. I hope I said that right. You may got a point here. Let's talk about Justin Fields for a second, because this is an extremely intriguing conversation to me. If the offensive line is struggling and the passing game is struggling because there's not a lot of time in the pocket, not a lot of plays to be had in structure because the offensive line is struggling, especially early in the season. The better quarterback for the Steelers in this case, hands down, don't care what your thoughts about Russell Wilson are. And I have pretty high regard for Russell Wilson. I do. I think that definitely an upgrade over Kenny Pickett. Definitely an upgrade over anything we've seen since maybe 2020 Ben Roethlisberger, early 2020 Ben Roethlisberger. Before we found out that he was basically a statue and couldn't move at all. Russ can do that at least, probably. But if your offensive line is going to struggle in pass protection and you're not going to be able to add to this wide receiver room, then you've got to lean as hard as you can into the we're going to pound it down your throat, run the football, ground and pound mentality. And Justin Fields is by far the better quarterback option for that. That's just the way it is. And I think that if you're going to have those issues, you just start Fields. You just do it. And that can help with some of those things. The escapability, the ability to create when there is nothing else, with his legs, and then also setting up the arm that way. Robert Mays and his co-host on the Athletic Football Show, they talked about this. Derek Clausen is his co-host. Talked about this where, Fields, when you have a guy like Fields on the field, he basically has to draw the attention of another player in the box at all time because of his rushing ability. You have to dedicate an extra resource to the box at all times, an extra set of eyes at least to the box at all times because of what he can do with his legs. And that stresses defenses. You can't just sit back and play traditional defense against this guy because he's going to tear you apart with his legs. And then if you're dedicating that extra resource, that helps when your wide receiver room isn't quite there. You don't have to dedicate the extra resource with Russ. He's going to be a pocket quarterback. I know he's got some mobility still. He didn't really get a chance to show it in this game, so you wonder about that still a little bit, I think. But man alive, I just think when you're talking about where this offense is at, counter to popular opinion probably, I think Justin Fields is the guy you'd want to go with. That's just my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong there. Let me know what you think. Kevin Herzog, how do you feel about players being able to wear the helmet protector? I like the purpose it serves, but I think it looks ridiculous in my opinion. I'll agree it looks ridiculous. It looks bubbly and huge, right? It looks like Megamind out there. My kid's on a Megamind binge right now. Just big head out there, standing out amongst the crowd. Helps that the Steelers have the black helmets, right? That helps mitigate how it stands out a little bit. But some of these other teams, oh man, the Colts with their white helmets, oh man, they're running back. Man, I should know this. I'm the fantasy guy, right? anyway, Jonathan Taylor, their running back, had the protector on and the helmet, the skull cap for it, and it just looked ridiculous. He looked like an alien for sure. I agree that the purpose is great, but if that helps so much, then why can't we incorporate it into the shells of the helmets? Why can't we incorporate it inside the helmet? Like, I don't understand why it has to be outside the helmet. So, and that's just, I'm not going to say I understand anything about the science behind that, but let's figure it out. We're smart people, right? Let's figure it out. Brian White, man, I predict this will be the worst offense. I'm going to say no. It's not going to be the worst offense. They'll get it figured out. They really will. We talked about this. Do you think Pat Meyer is the problem versus the players? I think he is the problem, most likely. This Brian White is probably not somebody we want to have in here much longer. Putting him in timeout. Let's see here. This is a good point from John Edborg. Fields' feet look like he was on hot coals. His runs are due to no pocket presence. That style didn't work in Chicago either. I would just push back and say, watch the tape. If he was moving around in the pocket using his legs, it was because he was being pressured. And it's unfortunate that that's the way it was, but you know, this is a guy I think has a lot to give to this offense. And yeah, okay, I'll give you that. He looked a little bit uncomfortable in the pocket at times, but how could you not with the pressure he was getting? It's really a struggle to evaluate them at all, either quarterback. But what I'm saying about Fields is his escapability and ability to use his legs as a weapon running down the field, 20, 30, 40-yard gains. That's something you don't get with Russ when the pocket's still collapsing like that. So if the pocket's going to be collapsing, maybe get the guy in there who can turn pockets collapsing into big plays, as opposed to the guy who can turn pockets collapsing into more sacks and turnover-worthy plays. I'm not saying Justin Fields won't have any of those, but at least give me the guy who can potentially get out there and make plays with his legs. So, good comment here from Jeff Hewitt. We're finding our identity in week 9. Shake my head as usual. I mean, sure. Most teams do. Most teams are not the same by the middle of the season as they are at the beginning. You just hope that the Steelers can play well enough in the first part of the season to keep their record afloat on the very positive side of things. So that way they can make things happen. They can make things happen in the second half of the season where the schedule gets so much tougher. So I think it'll be before that, Jeff. I think they'll figure some things out, but I do have my concerns because of this offensive line, because of how the game has kind of appeared so fast for them to this point. All right. You know what? I think that's going to do it. I've had my rants. The hope is here that the Steelers can figure some things out because it's just the preseason. And they've got a lot that they can work on still. A lot of time before the first game of the season where they can get some things done. And if they are able to do so, things will get better. Hey, I'm still recording, honey. Okay, you want this water? Sorry, folks. I have a little one trying to get some water. There you go.
Can I keep this in my room?
Go ahead. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for the show tonight. But the point being that it is just preseason. You've got some good things still. The defense has some ups that you're seeing. They've got some guys that are playing well. The offense is struggling. The backup rush defense was a little bit porous against the Bills. You saw them get worn down a little bit. But I think overall, you got to like where you sit on defense. It's going to be a good defense to great defense. Probably a great defense. I would say a top 5 unit by the end of the year in most categories. So that is that's what I'm leaning on right now to hopefully get us through to where we need to be. But hopefully, sorry about the kid. Kathy, thank you so much. Mr. Cat, but at least appearance by the kiddo. Here's the cat tonight. Fatso Catso. She was in early on in the show, but here she is. Always likes to join me on the couch for my recordings and keep me company. But anyway, appreciate you all tuning in. Sorry for the hectic end to the show here, but thank you so much for tuning into the Steelers Sunday Night Q&A. We'll be back next week, talk some more Pittsburgh Steelers football, and maybe we got some better news to talk about next week. Less injuries, better performance. Let's hope so. Until next time, though, my name is Jeremy Betts. This has been the Steelers Sunday Night Q&A. We'll talk to you next time.
Riding on cloud nine, we are living the good life. It's a good life. Living the good life. It's a good life. Living the good life.